Good evening from New York. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes, and thank you for joining us on a very, very busy Friday. We're covering a whole bunch of developing stories, including the escalating conflict between Israel and Iran. That began, or at least this round of it began 24 hours ago when Israel launched those military strikes against the capital city of Tehran, targeting both nuclear and military infrastructure, as well as key leaders, the armed forces, residential homes. Iran then retaliated earlier today, starting around 9 p.m. local time in Tel Aviv. The United States helped Israel defend against those strikes, so now we have apparently been pulled into yet another war in the Middle East, which really does seem to me to amount to another broken promise from the Trump administration, which quite clearly campaigned on that not happening. We're going to have much more on this story a little later in the hour. We begin tonight with what's happening here in the United States on American streets, where resistance and protests and public opinion and politics, all of that still matter. Across many, many different fronts today, the country is locked in a kind of arm wrestle between Donald Trump's desire to subjugate the country under his rule and the people's desire to not be governed unilaterally by a king. This conflict, of course, perhaps most pronounced in Los Angeles, where Trump has deployed the National Guard against the wishes of the state Democratic governor. The use of National Guard members was actually struck down by a district court judge yesterday, although they remain in L.A. pending an appeal. And as of today, you've also got 200 Marines that have been deployed into California, which is an enormous escalation. It shouldn't be conflated with the National Guard presence. We don't have Marines on U.S. streets, even under, normal conditions of civil unrest. According to Reuters, those Marines already detained at least one person at the federal building they have been directed to protect. And in fact, Reuters reporting the man that you see there, get this, ready? He's a veteran who was going to an appointment at the Department of Veterans Affairs and accidentally crossed a yellow line. This overreach extends far beyond the troops in L.A. Today, the Trump administration said it would not release recent Columbia graduate student Mahmoud Khalil, a legal resident, a green card holder who has not been charged with any crime. You may remember he was snatched from his home in front of his then 9-month pregnant wife. He's been imprisoned for 3 months over his protected political speech protesting Israel's war in Gaza. Now, Trump's Department of Justice said it would not release Khalil even after a federal judge determined he cannot be deported or detained under the reasoning initially provided by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, which is that Khalil's very presence in the country poses a national security threat. So the government now is saying he's being held for a different reason, related to some discrepancy in his green card application, which the same judge declined to block thus far. Now, let's be clear here, right? Mahmoud Khalil was not arrested and detained over a paperwork dispute. We're talking about the same administration that had federal agents manhandle a United States senator, force him to the ground, and handcuff him after he tried to ask a question at a press conference held by Trump's Homeland Security Director, Kristi Noem. A press conference, by the way, where Noem admitted that the military presence in Los Angeles was explicitly for political and ideological purposes. She said to liberate them from the socialist governing class there. This is also the same government that tried to forcibly prevent a United States congresswoman from exercising basic and legally protected oversight at an ICE detention facility in her district. Again, all in front of witnesses, all in front of cameras. They then charged the same congresswoman with federal crimes for her troubles. But as this administration has seen, as we are seeing, people are not just going to roll over and let the country devolve into an authoritarian state. And we are seeing this sort of inherent conflict, what has been the story of Trump 2.0 so far, to my mind, come to a head tomorrow, in fact. Donald Trump is holding a North Korean-style military parade, Soviet-style military parade through the nation's capital, something that we just don't do as a country. Like the last one we did was after the first Persian Gulf War, which was celebrating the end of a war. We don't have that here. It just so happens to fall on his 79th birthday. He's even fundraising from it, if you could believe it. Well, you can, of course. Sending out this email with the subject line, quote, "Please help me before my military parade." I'm sorry, that's a funny sentence. My military parade. And of course, Donald Trump has already promised, quote, "very heavy force against anyone who would choose to protest his special day. He didn't direct this at rioters or looters or people that broke the law. He said protesters would be met with very heavy force. And so it's not surprising that in places like, say, Florida, officials are out there talking like this.
If you throw a brick, a firebomb, or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at, because we will kill you graveyard dead. We're not going to play.
If somebody's in front of you and they're threatening your vehicle, you just drive.
Regardless of the threats, there will be enormous peaceful protests tomorrow, all across the country. In fact, from coast to coast. There will even be a few international protests in solidarity against Donald Trump's desire to rule like a king. In fact, we've been seeing a lot of protests against Donald Trump lately, and you might not know this if you watch the news, right? Writ large. There's this organization called Waging Nonviolence that actually tracks this, and it's a very scrupulous accounting. I got to say, I know the people that do it. They're academics. They're serious folks, right? So look at the blue line on the top. Those are organized nonviolent protests in 2025. They are far outpacing the same metric during Trump's first term. That's the green line on the bottom. More mass mobilization happening. Anecdotally, we are seeing report after report after report. I mean, truly, dozens a day I come across showing that regular people of all kinds of different politics and ideologies, even people who voted for Trump, are just not happy about his indiscriminate mass deportation scheme. Voters may support deporting those who have committed serious crimes. The polling would indicate that that's true. What is clear they do not support is deporting friends and family members and their neighbors and their coworkers and chasing people through strawberry fields and their employees. People who, in many cases, have lived here for years. In one case of an individual I saw today, he's been here 30 years. He's got kids and grandkids. And again, this isn't conjecture. Polling bearing this out. Earlier this week, Quinnipiac released a poll showing Trump underwater by double digits on both immigration issues and deportations specifically. Today, a new Reuters poll showing much the same. Voters by a margin of 9 points think Trump has gone too far with his deportations. They disapprove of the government arresting local officials who interfere in immigration enforcement by 14 points. They disapprove of how Trump has handled the Los Angeles protests by 15 points. Which is to say, it often doesn't feel like it, but the mass mobilization against Donald Trump is working. What this government is doing is unpopular with broad swaths of Americans. And the more people draw attention to it, the more unpopular it becomes. Time and time again, we've seen the people and courts and some key institutions force Trump to retreat. Here's an example. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is back in the United States. He's released from that mega prison in El Salvador, shipped off with no due process whatsoever, even after the Trump administration insisted multiple times that would never happen. He's never coming back. Today, after months of protest, he got a day in court, a U.S. court, where he pleaded not guilty to the charges this DOJ brought against him, and he will be able to enjoy due process as he is entitled to. In Washington, we got word that Senate Republicans have altered a portion of Trump's bill there that would have limited the court's ability to rein him in. They did so after folks across the country from Nebraska to Iowa showed up to town halls to tell the representatives about that provision the House put in. No way. It's going to require this kind of democratic force and mobilization against the Trump administration constantly. And believe me, I know it is exhausting. This is year 10 that I'm covering him. But there will be a million more small victories along the way. Starting tomorrow, when regular folks across the country, in small towns and big cities and everything in between, organize with a simple message: no kings, not ever. Lorella Praley is the co-president of Organization Community Change. It's one of the leaders of this weekend's No Kings demonstration. She's been very active in the planning. Michelle Goldberg is, of course, my good friend and opinion columnist from the New York Times, where she writes today, progressives need a global movement, and they join me now. It's good to have you both here.
Thank you.
Lorella, just tell me a little bit about what the organizers for tomorrow's protests are envisioning, what you're hearing, what the amount of reaction looks like.
I think we're expecting protests all over the country. I mean, you saw the map, small towns, rural America, in big cities. And I think what we're seeing is people saying enough. No kings in the United States of America. And all of these protests are happening on the heels of an escalating few weeks where they are overreaching. They are full force in elementary schools, at Home Depots, now also reportedly today going to parks, picking up nannies and the kids that they are taking care of to deport undocumented people. But actually what we're seeing across this country is them targeting anyone who looks like me, anyone who is Latino or brown and beyond in this moment. And so I think what we're going to see tomorrow is people saying that is not who we are. They're going to stand up, push back, and that's the kind of thing we need because no one is coming to save us. In an authoritarian breakthrough, the only backstop is us, the people. And that's what you're going to see tomorrow.
You know, one of the things that they do in their toolkit is project supreme confidence all the time, right? And I have to say, it can be quite effective. Like, there were all these stories, you know, and I think they were probably true of like, Trump people like thrilled with how Los Angeles is going. Like, haha, we have you, you dumb libs. You've walked right into our trap.
And can I just say that the mainstream media falls for it often,
all the
right?
time.
You constantly be like, oh, this isn't going to be good for Democrats. You know, how are Democrats going to answer the kind of 10 people who've thrown a rock or set a Waymo on fire?
And then it's also gratifying to me, like when I saw a senator being wrestled around, I'm like, that doesn't, I mean, I'm not the median voter, but I don't think people like that. That doesn't look good. And like, again, we're not crazy. Like, people don't like what they're seeing.
Right. And you see that in the polling, not just on immigration, but you've seen in a couple of polls now, you know, 37% approval rating for this president. You know, he obviously has a hard core of supporters, but the myth of this administration is that they represent kind of quote unquote the people, the American people, and everybody else are just some sort of fringe marginal weirdos who can't get with the program, which is why it's so important to have this kind of show of popular resistance because they aren't the people. And, you know, he won this election and there were certainly a lot of people who voted for him hoping that he would do exactly this. But we're also seeing that there were a lot of people who bought into this weird fantasy version of Trump in which he was just going to send them stimulus checks and deport the worst of the worst.